why gold is money, not because I want it to be money. But we also know that there are tremendous economic benefits from commodity money, and we know of all the disadvantages of paper money. And
I think you make the point in your book that when the boat people left Vietnam, they didn't take paper money with them, they took gold.
There's no way that you can get out with paper money in a crisis. You go back to the real stuff. And that's what will eventually happen here. We haven't quite seen it in recent years, but certainly when they were panicking in 79
Sure.
and 80,
Mm-hmm.
people would rush to gold because they want things of real value.
One concept when I talk to people about going to a gold standard, I frequently hear, and you've kind of alluded to it a little bit too, that there may not be enough gold to do it. A lot of people say there's not enough gold. And can you respond to that? Or how would you initiate going to the gold standard from being off of one?
Yeah, there's two reasons why they say, well, there's not enough gold. One is they're strongly anti-gold people, and they want the political benefits of controlling the money supply and printing up money and running the government the way they want in deficits. That's one reason why they say there's not enough gold. And the other is ignorance. They think, a lot of good people think, oh my God, where's the gold going to come from? I mean, there's too many more people now, too many products, there won't be enough gold to go around. But that doesn't work. Hans Sennholz, an Austrian economist from who taught up at Grove City for a long time, wrote a real interesting article on this one time, fully explaining why any amount of gold will work.
Okay.
What you need, though, for any amount of gold to work is you have to have a free market where commodity prices, in terms of gold, fluctuates. Let's take, for instance, if a loaf of bread today is $1, if you had a gold standard, what if a loaf of bread cost you a dime? You really wouldn't care as long as you had that dime, a gold dime versus a gold dollar. Well, if that price is down, you in essence have that money is spread out. You've in essence have made it functioning 10 times, tenfold greater. So you don't need to worry about the amount of gold. Besides, these many, many years of recorded history, we find that the gold supply does increase. It increases over centuries about 3% a year, regardless of the technology or whatnot. So the gold supply is going up at a steady rate. But I think it's also interesting that the monetarists who aren't gold standard people say, well, just leave the gold in the ground. We don't care. We can trust paper as long as you can trust your government. What do they say? They say, well, let's have a steady increase in the money supply of 3%.
Okay.
But the big difference there is that you can trust gold, you can't trust paper, because paper depends on the politicians.
Historically, it hasn't been a good place.
And they've never been able to be trusted with it. So the amount of gold is there. It will increase. Prices will just come down in terms of gold if the market says there's not enough gold circulating.
You had a House bill, I think it was 78, 74, and I'm going to try to get a copy of it. But in that House bill, does it explain how we would go from where we are today to the gold standard? Is that one of the main things that was done?
This was the purpose of it, and I haven't looked at that for a while. I don't recall the exact details, but the purpose of that was to design a program where you could go over and redefine the dollar in terms of gold and have a gold standard. But you can come up with a perfect program for a gold standard, but it won't mean a whole lot, because the lack of the gold standard is sort of a sociologic political problem. It's not an economic problem. It was the undermining of the gold standard, which is a good economic tool. It was undermined political and economic and social forces. Because the social forces say, we want welfare, we want big government, we want spending. So it's that force of running up deficits that requires governments to undermine the gold standard. So through the 50s and the 60s, it was the pressure to spend money, especially in the 60s, say for Vietnam. Remember the slogan, we would have guns and butter. It used to be guns or butter, then LBJ says guns and butter. So they just ran up the deficits, and what they had to do was they couldn't even tax us enough to pay for the bills, so they printed the money. And that attitude has to be changed. So without the change in attitude, you can't get to a gold standard. Now, in the Minority Viewpoints, part of that money book, and it does describe clearly, to the best of my ability, how you can work toward a transition under today's circumstances. I'm too pessimistic to expect the Congress and the government and the people to do what is right. They did okay after the Civil War. They went off the gold standard. They were off from 61 up to 1975, and between 76 and 79 they had a Restoration Act.
Mm-hmm.
They quit printing the money, they withdrew the greenbacks,
Right.
they balanced the budget, and the people trusted the government, and they went back on the gold standard. But today there's no way they're going to do that.
Well, we got a $4.5 trillion
in
debt.
spending. And the big argument is $200 billion deficit per year or $300 billion. They don't count the off budget. People wouldn't believe it. The markets wouldn't believe it. So the way I address that is, instead of pretending that all of a sudden we're going to have only people of goodwill managing our government, my suggestion was to have like a parallel standard.
Okay.
You know, at least legalize the use of a gold standard in the marketplace. So if you and I wanted to transact in gold, we could. And if somebody else wants to transact in paper that's depreciating, fine. So if you lend me 100 ounces of gold, and you trust me, and I pay you back in a year with 100 ounces of gold, you're going to be
110. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll pay you your percentage. Matter of fact,
Right.
I would get it for maybe 103 because my interest rate would, because your purchasing power would be going up. So you wouldn't get the interest. Now, if we do it in paper, I might want 15%, or you might want 15%, but under gold, you only ask for 3%. And that's why interest rates would be much lower, even for governments, if we were on some type of a gold standard.
In your book, you mentioned some things that are myths or facts, and if for the class, I was wondering if you could go through a few of these myths. One of them is paper money wealth? Well, first let's define paper money. Is paper money, in your mind, money that is not backed by a precious metal?
That's what paper money would be. All currencies, if they're certificates and redeemable in gold, that wouldn't, even though it's paper, it's not paper money. When you refer to paper money, you usually think of fiat money, that is created out of thin air.
So it's not backed by anything but the promise of government.
Other than the promises of government.
So even on a gold standard, you would still have paper money, but that would be backed by gold or a precious metal. Or
you know, in the 18th century, in the early part of this century, we had gold certificates, and if you had that either by the government or the market, it's not they would be, the integrity of those certificates would depend on the person who issued them. And our government hasn't even had a very good record of that. First they confiscated our gold in their 30s. And then the bonds, the government bonds that promised to pay in gold, the courts accommodated Roosevelt and declared that they didn't have to pay back in gold. I mean, a monstrous breakdown of contract. But if you had market money, if it was American Express, maybe they would issue their certificates, and you might even end up trusting them or the banks more than the government. But the integrity of the money would depend on the government's role would be to guarantee the fulfillment of contract.
Okay.
And whether it's their own contract or somebody else's contract. But it wouldn't have to be much more than that. If you had $1 and it was worth so much of gold, it should be fulfilled. Otherwise, you're committing fraud.
I got kind of diverted when I was asking about the myth, but paper money is wealth. That's one of the myths, I think.
Yes, people think if government just prints a little bit and sends you a bill, you're going to have wealth. It isn't wealth, but if the government up there today printed 10 smacking new $100 bills and sent them to you, and they weren't the old kind of counterfeit, but they were just the ordinary government counterfeit, and you had $1,000, you would say, what do you mean it's not wealth? I have wealth, I have $1,000. I'm going to go out and spend it. Well, it can purchase, real value with that paper money, but it's not the creation of overall wealth. The only reason that $100 or the $1,000 has the connotation of wealth is because it diluted the real wealth that's in my pocket. It steals the wealth by becoming a counterfeit. You have to think of it as counterfeit. So in a way, you could fool the people in the short run for counterfeit, but it doesn't create wealth. If it were wealth, all you'd have to do is run off the printing presses, and everybody would be wealthy if you printed a lot of money.
So it sounds like you say the federal government is counterfeiting our money right now.
In the moral sense, it's pure counterfeit.
Okay, and they're not supposed to be doing that. That's one of their...
That's exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to guarantee that there is not counterfeit. But yet now